I'm pleased now to introduce our speaker today, Michael Wood, who was born and educated in Perth, undertook his undergraduate degree in philosophy here at the University of Western Australia before joining the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He served as a diplomat in Mexico, India, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Chicago, where he was Consul General covering the US Midwest. I called him the Consul General to Obama land, being in Chicago. Some of you in the audience would know Michael from the time he was director of DFAT's office here in WA from 2012 to 2015. Since leaving the federal government, he has produced and directed the Australian Festival of 10-Minute Plays. Some of you might have seen it. Short and Sweet is the series in both Perth and Vietnam. Short and Sweet, unfortunately, probably is not our event tonight, but I would expect our questions to be short and sweet. He currently lives in Ho Chi Minh City, where his wife is on posting. Michael's talk today covers the challenging issues surrounding Israel and Palestine. He will explore whether the proposal, which has been put forward for some time now by a range of activists from Israel, Palestine, and the international community, known as the One Democratic State, which could be the way to peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. Michael will speak for about 40 minutes, maybe a bit more, following which we will have our audience members in their customary session to put questions to Michael for a Q&A. Michael, can I welcome you to the rostrum, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brendan. Can I just do a very quick sound check? Am I about the right volume for everybody here? Yes. Great. Okay. Thank you. So thanks again. Thanks to the AIIA for inviting me tonight. Thank everybody for coming along as well. And I want to echo and just amplify Brendan's comments about the AIIA and its staunchly independent stance. Nothing I say reflects any of the views of the AIIA. They are entirely my views. And to the credit of the AIIA, they didn't seek to find out precisely what I was going to say tonight. They truly are a forum for open discussion. Now, I want to say that, first up, that I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm an atheist. I'm not Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. I have no attachment to Israel or Palestine other than my intellectual curiosity. But I do have some history on the issue that I want to share with you, and some of you might actually share it with me because I see some grey hair. When I was a kid, I was a voracious reader, and I poured through my parents' bookshelves, and I came across books by Leon Uris. Many of you will know. Post-war Jewish writer, wrote Exodus, many other books about the Holocaust. And I also read The Source by James Michener, a similar era sort of book about the establishment of Jerusalem over the millennia. And I became what I now call like a romantic Zionist. I thought that Israel was a beautiful and necessary creation, a heroic act, and I celebrated it the way that most Jews would have celebrated it at the time. Then I joined the Department of Foreign Affairs, and I slowly started to learn more about the issues, and there was no blinding light on the road to anywhere, but I came to have very fundamentally different views about what had happened in Palestine. And I started to ask myself questions, and I found that there were inconsistencies and gaps in the answers, and fundamentally what I came to conclude was that my fundamental assumption about the creation of Israel, that it was terra nullius, was a lie. It was just an outright falsehood. And I came to also conclude that what the Western world had done with the creation of Israel was the basic fallacy of thinking that two wrongs make a right. That somehow the horrors of what the Germans did to the Jews and other minorities in the Second World War could somehow be erased by forcing Palestinians out of their homes at the end of a gun. And we created truly a humanitarian crisis, a misery for Palestinians for the last 77 years, and a crisis which is on the Western world that we now need to address. Now, for absolute clarity, I have to say that I do not support terrorism in any form. Terrorism being the calculated use of violence or the threat of violence against civilians in order to achieve political ends. And I don't support them whether they are perpetrated by the Israeli Defense Force or whether they're perpetrated by Hamas or any other Islamic militants. And I do not support Palestinian hopes that they will push the Jews out of Israel into the sea any more than I support the Zionist intentions of ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Palestine. So I'm in the middle of all of this, and I'm going to speak plainly if you haven't heard that yet. I'll say things that some of you will think should not even be thought. This is no time for oblique insinuations. If you look at the map, you'll see from 1947 on the left, where Palestinians in green inhabited and controlled all of this territory, through to the present day, you can see how much Palestinian presence is now left in the old Mandate Palestine. This is a process of ethnic cleansing, as I will show you. It is extremely deliberate, it is constant, and it has one endpoint. So I will not mince my words. I apologize to all my friends who may find that some of the things I say are too blunt, but they are things that need to be said. Netanyahu and his ministers clearly believe that they are arriving at an end point at the moment, and this must be stopped. So I'm going to offer you strong, clear judgments. I'm going to offer you strong, clear evidence to support that. Please hold me to it. Okay, enough small print. Let's move on to one democratic state. Put my cards on the table for you here. One democratic state, or a one-state solution, or binationalism, or an ethnically integrated state was first advocated by Jewish intellectuals in the early 20th century, people who wanted to have a homeland in Mandate Palestine, but they did not support a Jewish state. Essentially, a one democratic state is a genuine democracy as we think of it today within the boundaries of historic Palestine. Everybody gets the same vote. Everybody gets to be held to the same laws. Everybody has the same freedoms. They have the same obligations. It would be like any country that you might want to live in today. And everybody has to live together. Jews, Christians, Muslims, who lived together for centuries following the establishment of Islam in the 6th century of this era. That living together was not always perfect, but it works just fine in Australia today, in the UK, in the US. Peaceful coexistence is again possible in Israel. Now there's a logic which leads me, and I believe leads everybody, to the conclusion that the one democratic state is the only way, the only pathway to a just and sustainable peace. And I say just because unless peace, this pathway acknowledges the legitimate interests of both sides, it will not be sustainable. Now, some of the propositions on the screen you're looking at now might appear contentious to you. I'm going to summarize them right now, but I will then move on to support every one of those judgments with evidence. So, first, Israel has not turned out to be what the Western world intended. It is now an amoral apartheid theocracy, and it's not a democracy. It must be called out, and all levers available to us must be used in order to change this and restore decency and peace. We must act soon because the Palestinians are being aggressively ethnically cleansed from Israel. Time is critical. The two-state solution cannot be implemented. Israel and Palestine can never agree between themselves on a sustainable peace. The solution has to be forced from the outside, and no one must be forced out of Israel in doing that. One democratic state is for Jews, Muslims, Christians, everybody who lives in current-day Israel. And the only sustainable peace is where all inhabitants have the same rights. It must be one democratic state where everybody is equal, a genuine democracy. Let's look at these points one by one. So I said Israel is amoral. Israel cannot defend killing 59,000 Palestinians and rising daily in response to the deaths around the time of the 7th of October 2023, roughly 1,200. At the very least, what we're witnessing is the war crime of collective punishment of civilians by the Israelis, at the very least. But the numbers you're seeing there, they're obscene. Al Jazeera reports that Israel is using drone-delivered missiles packed with nails. These are anti-personnel missiles, and that they are being delivered to designated safe zones in Gaza. Something more evil is motivating the Israelis than revenge. Israelis are killing people in food queues. On 21 July, the Israeli daily Haaretz, Hebrew and English newspaper, reported, and the title says it all. Soldiers testify, this is Israeli Defense Force soldiers, testify they received orders to deliberately shoot unarmed Palestinians in aid lines. This is an obscenity. This is the work of an unhinged society. And there are daily reports about this from multiple sources. Starvation deaths. We're seeing rising numbers of deaths and imagery of starvation that I decided not to plague us with here. Again, Israel, in seeking deliberately to starve people to death, is showing itself to be a monster. It is not a moral actor. Israel is systematically destroying the Palestinian medical system, targeting hospitals, clinics, and physicians. The World Health Organization announced that on 21 July, Israel attacked its staff residence and main warehouse in Gaza. This is despicable. And we've seen too many reports to not realize that all of this is deliberate. I personally cannot imagine how you could not find these reports compelling, but I do leave open the possibility that you might imagine that Israel was enraged by the terrorist activities of Hamas on the 7th of October 2023, and that Israel is now overreacting. It's not doing the right thing, but it didn't start this particular fight, and things will calm down. But in order to judge that proposition, we should go back to history. Now, this is David Ben-Gurion. Before 1948, David Ben-Gurion was the preeminent leader of the Yishuv, the Jewish community in British Mandate Palestine. He became the preeminent leader of the movement for a Jewish state in Palestine, and he became the first Prime Minister of Israel from 1948 to 1963, with a couple of years interregnum. So effectively, he shaped Israel for the first 15 years of its existence. So what sort of person was David Ben-Gurion? Well, go by his own words. He says, "We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population." That's in 1948. Speaking to the General Staff at the time of the announcement of the establishment of the State of Israel. Now, terror, assassination, this is what we have seen done to the Palestinians ever since this time, and it's what we're seeing today. And the underlying project of Israel is on full display here. Ridding the Galilee of its Arab population is an unambiguous expression of intent to ethnically cleanse Palestine of Palestinians. Now, was David Ben-Gurion possibly at this time quoted out of context? This is from his own diary in 1948. "If we accuse a family, we need to harm them without mercy, women and children included, and there is no need to distinguish between guilty and not guilty." This is also what we are seeing in Gaza today with the bombing of civilians, starvation of children. Now, David Ben-Gurion, measured by his own words, is a brutal war criminal. The timing is also disturbing, is it not? This is 1948. This is 3 years after the world learnt the worst of what had happened in Germany. And here is his own planning for treatment that is very hard to distinguish from what was delivered to the Jews in the Second World War. He wasn't alone. Joseph Weitz, the director of the Jewish National Land Fund in 1932, said there is no room for both peoples in this country. The only solution is Eretz Israel without Arabs. There is no way besides transferring the Arabs from here to the neighboring countries. We must not leave a single village, not a single tribe. Of course, we see these same efforts to transfer Palestinians out of Israel all the time. I mean, Netanyahu's come up with I don't know how many proposals to have them exit via Egypt, to have them put into some humanitarian city. There are constant efforts to remove Palestinians from their original homeland. So, I don't know. I find Israel to be an amoral actor. Israel is not a democracy. This is extremely easy. Under the basic law of Israel, which is the closest we have to the Constitution of Israel, Article 1C says, the right to exercise national determination, self-determination in the State of Israel is unique to the Jewish people. What this means is that other people don't get to determine how Israel develops. And you'll see that that leads to about 50% of the population of modern-day Israel not having the vote. So if you add the population of Gaza and the population of the West Bank together, you roughly get the population, the Jewish population of Israel. 50% of the country cannot vote. It is not a democracy. It is a theocracy. That's what it means to be unique to the Jewish people. Now, for clarity, Israel does not recognize that the Gaza and the West Bank are part of a Palestinian state. It's not as if they say, well, we can't let them vote because they're not part of Israel. They have just recently, to make everything black and white, they actually annexed Gaza and the West Bank into Israel. and they do not give those people, the 50% of the population, the vote. I said Israel is an apartheid state, but you don't need to take my word for this. This is Ari Ayalon, the former commander-in-chief of the Israeli Navy, director of Shin Bet, the security organization, and former Israeli cabinet minister, speaking on ABC radio in 2021. And he says, there is a specific law when dealing with the Palestinians who are living in the territory, and there is a totally different law when we're dealing with settlers who are living in the same territory. There are many roads that Palestinians cannot use. If you're a Jewish settler in Hebron, you will get much more drinking water than if you're a Palestinian in the same city. So this is apartheid. There is no other way to describe it. That's the conclusion of an Israeli cabinet minister. This is a photo from my time when I last visited. One side is Israel, other side is Palestine. Even the South African whites could not have dreamt of such perfect separation, such perfect division of societies. So, in conclusion, the international community that supported the creation of Israel never imagined that we would have the Israel that we see today, the racist, apartheid theocracy. But what did we actually imagine we were going to get? Very quickly, because most of you probably know about the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration by the British, who controlled British Mandate Palestine after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, stated that the British supported the creation of a homeland for the Jews in Mandate Palestine. But very specifically, they said, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Just for clarity here, the population of Palestine was almost 80% Muslim at the time. It was like 11% Jews. It's not like the non-Jewish community were some sort of minority. Now, this is also an utter nonsense by the British. How could they have imagined that they could have allowed the immigration of a vast number of people from a different country without impinging on the social and political rights of the people, of the inhabitants of the country? So that was a fundamental error, and perhaps easiest to understand when you realize that there were 4 drafters of the Balfour Declaration. 2 of them were Jewish, including the principal drafter, Leo Avery. And the Palestinians were at no time even consulted on the drafting of the Balfour Declaration. So what's happened to nothing shall be done to prejudice the civil and religious rights of Palestinians? Well, we'll look at the map there. From 1947 on the left through to today, you can hardly see what is left of Palestine. Now, to be sure, in 1948, the second image from the left there was passed by the United Nations as the partition plan for Palestine, which would give roughly half of Palestine to the Palestinians and half of it to the Zionists, but in fact it was slightly bigger than half for the Jews. I guess they got lucky. But what happened to that? It never happened. Partition was never implemented by the United Nations, and the reason why is because David Ben-Gurion, who we've looked at already, announced the establishment of the Jewish state before the UN was preparing to announce partition. And the reason why is because Ben-Gurion, head of the Zionist movement, was not prepared to share Israel with the Palestinians in a way that would be policed by the United Nations. They realized they had to act earlier than that in order to get the whole of Israel, which is what has happened. So at the time, to be fair, Ben-Gurion said that he committed to, quote, ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all Israel's inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. But we know from everything that he said publicly and privately prior to that point that he had no such intention. He told us explicitly in 1937 that partition was simply a stalking horse. This is him speaking to Zionists in 1937. After the formation of a large army in the wake of the establishment of the state, we will abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. Is that what we have seen? Now, not every Jew at the time thought that creation of a Jewish state would end well. Albert Einstein, a Jew, was notable on this point. Now, to be clear, he was a Zionist. He believed in a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, but not a Jewish state. Speaking in 1938 in New York, he said, and this is to the National Labour Committee for Palestine, "I should much rather see reasonable agreement with the Arabs on the basis of living together in peace than the creation of a Jewish state. My awareness of the essential nature of Judaism resists the idea of a Jewish state with borders, an army, and a measure of temporal power, no matter how modest. I am afraid of the inner damage Judaism will sustain, especially from the development of a narrow nationalism within our own ranks, against which we have already had to fight strongly, even without a Jewish state." That was well before the creation of Israel, but in 1948 he was dragged back into the issue when members of the Irgun terrorist militia operating in Mandate Palestine at the time against the British. This was the Zionists seeking to kick the British out of Mandate Palestine. Came to Einstein and asked for his support to raise funding for the Irgun, or was it, sorry, the Lehi, the Stern Gang, in 1948. Einstein wrote back, "Dear Sir, when a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. I am not willing to see anybody associated with those misled and criminal people." Albert Einstein on the 10th of April 1948. The people he's talking about are people like David Ben-Gurion, Menachem Begin, subsequent Prime Minister as well, and others who led the Lehi and the Irgun terrorist organizations prior to 1948. And you have to ask yourself, what would Einstein say about the Israel that he sees today? There's not so much living in peace with the Arabs, but rather bombing them and starving them to death in concentration camps created by the Israelis. So Einstein knew his tribe. We need to talk about Hamas. The first thing to note is that Hamas was democratically elected by Palestinian voters in 2006 with quite a significant majority. It was not recognized by the Western world for the terrorist activities undertaken by its militia, military wing, the Iz al-Din al-Qassam brigades. And they'd earned their reputation for terrorism. They pioneered suicide bombings designed to kill civilians through the 90s and the 2000s. So let's talk a bit about terrorism. So this is terrorism in Israel-Palestine, but in 1948, there's about 100 bodies there in a town called Deir Yassin. It was a village on the outskirts of Jerusalem. 600 people in that village. After about 100 villagers were massacred by the Irgun and the Lehi Israeli terrorist militia, the rest of the people fled. And that is really the story of Palestine. They were threatened and killed, and in the end fled for their lives. Today you will not find Deir Yassin on maps of Israel. The commander-in-chief of Irgun, one of the two militia responsible for this massacre, was Menachem Begin, and he was very satisfied with the outcome. That terror, Deir Yassin, he says, was worth more than 1,000 tanks. David Ben-Gurion was very satisfied. He said, without Deir Yassin, there would not be an Israel. So by Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin's own assessment, Israel would not exist if it were not for terror. And I could go through a list of so many different terror activities by these militia prior to 1948. You don't have time. There are too many of them, listed by Haaretz, again, an Israeli newspaper. And at the time, there was no Palestinian militia. They were farmers. They were sitting ducks for these militia who were seeking Einstein's help to get funding to remove the British from Palestine. Menachem Begin, as I said, he was recognized for his contribution to the founding of Israel by becoming Prime Minister in 1977. And now in 2025, we live in a bubble of the Israeli narrative, and Hamas is the terrorist, while the IDF is ordered to shoot at civilians standing in food queues. My approach is to reject terrorism wherever I see it, but I make sure I see it wherever it is. For those who fear that Israel will never be safe, back to Hamas, the people who fear that Israel will never be safe while Hamas exists, I say two things. Israel could at any time make itself safe by giving all Palestinians in Israel the vote and granting them all the rights and freedoms that Jews have. Let everybody air their differences in the chambers of Parliament. They could achieve this tomorrow if they wanted most of anything to be safe. But that is not their priority. The other thing that I say that Israelis already know is that every Palestinian is Hamas, in that every Palestinian hates Israel with a depth that we Australians cannot begin to understand. Unless perhaps you can imagine waking up one morning in your house in Subiaco or Bassendean to find that a bunch of guys with submachine guns are pointing at you through your front door, and they're telling you and your family, your pregnant wife with complications, your father with dementia, your newborn son, to go and move and put yourself into the chicken coop in the backyard. And then once you've done that, those men with submachine guns put razor wire around the chicken coop, and they tell you that you cannot leave without their permission. Your wife dies in childbirth because she's not allowed to go to the hospital that has the necessary capability to look after her conditions. Shortly after, your son dies from malnutrition and health complications. Every night, those people come and they wake you up at some random time of the night. They wake up your children who are meant to be going to school the next day because they need to search your house, your chicken coop house. And the people one of those men who kicked you out of your house, they have moved in, they moved their family into your house. If you have electricity and water, they turn it off when you most need it. and they shoot holes in the water tank on top of your chicken coop. Would you maybe throw a rock at the window of your old house? If you did that, they would come and they would take you, and they would put you in prison. They would not charge you with anything because there are no laws that protect you at all. You are not subject to Israeli law. They might keep you there for a year. And when you come out, you discover that your demented father has passed away and you were not there. Perhaps at this point, when you come back, you might burn a tire. Or possibly you'll dig a tunnel to get out of this concentration camp. You might dig a tunnel to escape, to go to another country. You might dig a tunnel to go and attack the people who have destroyed your life. The people who've taken away your health, your freedom, your wife, your baby. Now I want to suggest to you, there are not many people here who can put themselves in the shoes of Palestinians. And when you think about terrorism, you need to think who is doing what to whom. There is no monopoly on terrorism in Israel-Palestine. I don't think it's a useful metric to understand who is right and who is wrong. But every time that Israel now bombs Gaza, for every person that they kill, 1,000 more Palestinians are signing up in their head for Hamas militia. They're saying, enough is enough. I have nothing but my ability to fight this terror. And of course the Israelis are not foolish, they absolutely know this. So when they tell you that they are trying to eliminate Hamas, they are lying. They know every Palestinian is Hamas, and that they are going to eliminate. What they're actually seeking to do is to ethnically cleanse Gaza. You see it in every suggestion that people should move out of Gaza or move into a humanitarian city. These are all about ethnic cleansing. So we need now to talk about genocide. We have to make a critical judgment on Israel because it tells us what we must do now. The UN definition of genocide, you can see there, says genocide is any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial or religious group by various measures. And the modus operandi of preference for the Israelis is C, you'll see. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, I want to put to you that if you were a diabolical despot, could you think of a more brutal way of degrading the conditions of life of your victims than by forcing them into concentration camps like Gaza, bombing them with nail-filled missiles, denying them food, then shooting them in food aid queues, while also destroying their hospitals? No, it is exactly what Israel is doing. Israel is committing genocide 101 in Gaza. And this is not just my judgment. A former Israeli hostage negotiator, Gershon Baskin, said on 24 July, just recently, that what is happening in Gaza is genocide. He equates it with the Holocaust. And indeed, people who deny that genocide is taking place in Gaza are denying what is happening with the same weight of evidence that there is for the Holocaust. If you deny the genocide in Gaza today, you are no better than a Holocaust denier. So no, what we really need is effective action against Israel. The time has passed now for words. We've said, please stop for 77 years. Words are not enough, and I will come back to that. But for now, let's go back to the logic of one democratic state. So I think we talked about the first 2 points. On the third one, Israel and Palestine will never agree among themselves to a fair and sustainable peace because, as we know, we've seen from their own words, Israel is determined to ethnically cleanse Palestine of all Palestinians. What is there that Palestinians can agree to? And for over 77 years, the Israelis have refused to deviate from this path. We see this on the map of Palestine. Now, critically, Israel is backed by the entire weight, financial and military, of the United States. So when you actually say Palestinians must negotiate bilaterally with the Israelis, what you're actually saying is that the chicken and the fox have to negotiate what is on the menu for lunch today, while the farmer, the US farmer, is standing behind the fox with a gun pointing at the chicken. There is no solution that can ever emerge from negotiations directly between Israel and Palestine. A just peace must be imposed from the outside. Now let's come to the two-state solution, which many people still subscribe to, including your own government here. So the two-state solution, in the form agreed under the 1993 Oslo Accords, was to have been implemented only 2 years later, in 1995. That's over 30 years ago now. And those who support the two-state solution are still waiting. It's beyond implausible. And since then, in any event, the Israelis have systematically and deliberately undermined any prospect that a two-state solution could be implemented. We'll get to that. Borders were never agreed under the Oslo Accords, but you'll see on the second from the right there, 1967 borders, that is roughly what Palestinians believe they are agreeing to in Oslo. They would get just those two patches of green there. You can see how much of a concession that is from the Palestinians already, right from partition from only 20 years before. But they were willing to do it. But there has been no intention at all on the part of the Israelis to implement that. And what we've seen is even worse. The outcome of Oslo was the fragmentation of the West Bank into parts that are controlled by the Israelis and parts controlled by Palestinians. And that has been further degraded by Israel with roads, walls, firing ranges, and of course settlements. But for a moment, let's imagine the unimaginable, which is that there was willingness on both sides to try to create a two-state solution now, today. Bear in mind, you're starting from the right-hand picture there, and you want to get back to maybe something like the one right to its left, 1967 borders. Now, in order to agree on a two-state solution, you have to imagine that Palestine would be given some sort of contiguous space. You can't give Palestine the fragmented Bantustans that exist on the far right. And then you have a negotiation. How do you pull that together? And you have to negotiate all the issues that matter to nation states. You have to work out who gets what agricultural land. You have to work out who gets access to the sea and sea rights, who has a port, who has an airport, who has air rights. How much water does each side get? And given the history of this issue, there is no prospect that any single one of those issues would be resolved within a human time frame. No prospect at all. And you can be sure that in the time that it takes to negotiate any of those issues, there will be no green left on the right-hand side. Now, that's all before we discuss Israeli settlements. What's the impact of settlements? Well, perhaps we could move the settlements, right? I mean, there are settlements, they're in the way, let's move them. This is, I apologize for my pronunciation, Modin Illit, in the Israeli settlement, the biggest one, Haredi ultra-nationalist. Population about 91,000, about the size of Bunbury. Established in the 1990s, probably got about 2 or 3 generations there, people who've never lived anywhere else. This is the second, Baitar Elit, about 73,000, bit earlier, 85. Male would have been smaller, about the size of Bustleton, settled in 1975. Now I could go on and on because there are in 2023 there are 144 settlements in the West Bank, including 12 in Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. And even if there was the will in these cities, these towns and these even the village-sized settlements, there's no way they can be moved. It would involve the forcible relocation of hundreds of thousands of people. Many of those people were born in these places. They know no other home. And nothing is clearer in my mind that the answer to the brutal eviction of the Palestinians in 48 is not the brutal eviction of young Jewish kids today from their homes. We must not answer brutality with brutality. We must not evict children from their homes. Now, the Israeli government pretends that the settlements are outside of their control, but this is a lie. The Israeli Defense Force routinely protects settlers. Recently, in 2025, the Israeli government announced at least 9 new settlements, removing any pretense that settlements are created anarchically. And the settlements have killed the two-state solution, if it was ever truly alive. They cannot be moved. So back to one democratic state, we're led inevitably to the conclusion that the only pathway to a just and sustainable peace is through one democratic state. You can't do it with a two-state solution. You can't get the Israelis and the Palestinians to negotiate between themselves. Now, maybe you might have followed me in some sort of intellectual sense up to this point, but still, you'll say you cannot imagine how we could overcome the obstacles to create one democratic state. And one of the biggest obstacles, you might imagine, is the idea that Israel will no longer be only for the Jews. That was the fairy tale. Well, as we've already seen, the Western world never intended that Israel would only be for the Jews. It never intended that it would be a chauvinist Jewish state. Why? And why would we support that anyway? Do we support theocratic states elsewhere, like in Iran, Saudi Arabia? Why is it okay in Israel? And I mean, what if I were to suggest that it's really now about time that we just accepted that Australia is just for Caucasians, and we should get the Aboriginals and the Asians and the Africans, and we should move them to very large concentration camps in the middle of Australia, and then we should bomb them and starve them. And just, how do you respond to that suggestion? How do you feel about that? But that is what's happening in Israel. Why do we let it happen in Israel? So yeah, you're going to say, well, of course, genocide is shockingly bad, but we gave the country to the Israelis and we can't take it back now. Well, as we've seen, we did not give it to the Israelis as some exclusive gift. The Balfour Declaration, said they had to share it with the locals, the existing occupants. So it's not like we're taking anything back with one state, one democratic state. We're just saying the country in former Palestine has to be a true democracy. And we're not taking anything away from the Jews. No one has to leave Israel under one democratic state. Everybody can stay there. The people in those cities, those settlements, can stay there. The only thing being taken away from the Zionist Israelis is their worst impulses, the impulses that Einstein foresaw with such clarity. Now, the real question, I think, is, are we willing to act against the Israelis to impose change upon them through sanctions and, if necessary, peacekeeping operations? Because it would truly be as if the Israelis are going from being the darling of all victims, to being the aggressor. Well, by now you should know they honestly have never been darlings. Let's think back to David Ben-Gurion. Israel is entirely a Zionist creation. And Zionists, by definition, are racists by conviction and practice. I don't think they would deny that. They believe that Jews are special and deserve a special place. So we were wrong to give them exceptional status. They don't have a right to put Muslims in concentration camps and bomb them and starve them. Did we think the Germans had a right to do that in the Second World War? When the Western powers drafted the new German constitution after the war, did they pull the Germans aside and say, look, it's okay, you don't have to give Jews and homosexuals the vote? Why do we accept this in Israel? We must stop doing so. We must stop treating Israel differently. The implementation of a one democratic state, there are two key phases. The first is to prevent genocide and ethnic cleansing. That's phase one. Phase two is how we implement a permanent one-state democratic institutions. When should we act? Immediately. Gazans are being bombed and starved. When tomorrow we are still not implementing sanctions, the collective moral failing is with us. And if international action all sounds way too implausible, you need to know that there is a massive weight of support within the international community for Palestine. It's something of a mystery to Australians. Let's just have a look at why that would be. So Australia has been a misery for Palestinians ever since 1947, when the Australian Minister for External Affairs, Doc Everett, as chair of the UN ad hoc committee for the Palestinian question, and also later as president of the UN General Assembly, proactively helped create the state of Israel with scant concern for the existing inhabitants. I'm certain that the great majority of Australians, I'm sure many people here don't fall into this category, but they would be astounded to discover that approximately 3/4 of the world already recognize the Palestinian state. 3/4. So we are in a tiny minority, a recalcitrant minority, and a shrinking minority. Now, why that is another story, that's another talk. The lesson to take away from this, though, is that there is a massive weight of support for Palestine out there that we are not connected with yet. So, sanctions, phase one. What I suggest, the only things that will make Israel budge in the time frame that we need to prevent ethnic cleansing and genocide is that we must impose the same sanctions that we've imposed on Russia tomorrow. All of them, all at once. Giving Russia 3 years drip-feeded sanctions has only allowed it to sidestep all of those sanctions. So all trade with Israel, exports and imports, need to cease immediately. Arms trade and Israeli spyware, blacklisted. Financial transactions with Israel, frozen. Visas permanently denied against Israeli ministers and officials involved in ethnic cleansing and genocide. And if these sanctions do not bring about an immediate ceasefire and restitution of open food delivery, we need to send in peacekeepers, like we do to other troubled spots on the planet. If we see genocide in other places, we try to act as soon as we can. And when we don't, we see ourselves as having failed abysmally, as we have in Rwanda, for instance. This is where we want to behave better. We have to do this because we put Palestinians in harm's way in 1948, and we have to stop the horror that we created. Now, I've been talking about the United Nations and or a coalition because there's one overwhelming reason why the United Nations will not act in the near future. we need to talk about America. Without the unconditional support of the United States, Israel would not be what it is today. It would not be an undemocratic, theocratic state, because it would have been forced to have allowed Palestinians to have the vote by the United Nations Security Council. The US has used its veto in the Security Council to prevent every reasonable measure designed to provide equity and fairness in Israel. Just recently, in the last couple of years, the US has used its veto in the Security Council to prevent ceasefires in Gaza. This is inhuman. The US has lost all moral legitimacy on this question. Leave you to see how it stands on other questions, but on this one it's clear. And today I would say, if anything, the US is more unconditionally supportive of Israel. But at the same time, US allies are beginning to ignore the United States. Its moral authority is in free fall. And you see this with France, which has decided to break with the United States and recognize a Palestinian state. You've even seen it with Australia. We joined a group of 30 other countries organized by the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, who said that they called for a ceasefire. They expressed their extreme concern about the bombing of Gazans and the delivery and the blockages in the delivery of food. Australia could never have done that 2 years ago. It would be unthinkable for us not to be in lockstep with the United States. We even also broke with the United States on the sanctions we applied to 2 Israeli cabinet ministers. So this is all... Sorry, I've lost my... There we go. So think back. Those 140 plus countries that recognize Palestine already, they could join a coalition of common purpose, of decency, of fairness and equity, peace-seeking coalition. The important thing is we have to be prepared to ignore the United States if we want to stop genocide in Gaza. It sounds unthinkable, almost, but so is genocide. We have to start thinking differently. Back to implementing phase 2, building the future. I'm sorry I'm going to rush through this because I've already well overstepped my time. But I want to let you know that I have thought about these issues and that they can be dealt with. So first, the apartheid basic law, it says it's for Jews only, and the undemocratic Knesset, only 50% of the country get to vote for it, they need to be suspended or dissolved. If Israel does not act to do so itself under the pressure of sanctions, then international peacekeepers need to step in to enforce that. You'll all have your own hunches on this, but if that is threatened, then I think you'd find that Israel will be obliged to move in some direction. The very threat of it would be extremely compelling, but remember you have 140 countries that recognize Palestine already. There would need to be the provision of full citizenship and full rights for everybody in the country. That should not sound strange to anybody. That's what happens in democracy. Israelis would want to eliminate Hamas leadership from such a future. Would they be willing to exclude Israeli generals who have authorized and ministers who have authorized the shooting of Palestinian civilians in food queues? Let's see how that issue would play out. Elections. So the United Nations or the coalition would need to ensure that fair and true elections of all inhabitants take place and create a new government. Following that, property. First step would be that anybody in Israel should be able to buy or sell property anywhere. there would be no limits. I should say, by the way, that all walls should be bulldozed tomorrow the way that Israelis have been bulldozing Palestinian olive trees. That should happen instantly. Roads become accessible to everybody instantly. Barbed wire removed instantly. And then once you allow everybody to buy and sell property, then you need to deal with long-standing property disputes that go back to 1948. Immensely complex. My answer to this would be to give it to some UN or coalition agency designed to do this. It would take forever. It would be immensely difficult. A little bit like South Africa. I mean, it happens, right? It happens slowly, and maybe the fact that it happens slowly is not a bad thing, but it must be done from outside. Immigration and refugees. The Palestinians are going to want to have all Palestinian refugees given the right to return to Palestine. They've been watching any Jew from anywhere around the world given automatic citizenship in Israel, granted by the Israeli governments since 1948. It's not an unreasonable request on the part of the Palestinians, you might imagine, but there are about 6 million refugees recognized by the United Nations outside Israel today. Not all of them, of course, would want to come back. Again, what I suggest you do is that you have a body that is constituted by the United Nations or the coalition, which would be responsible for determining those issues in the early years. And at some point you pass all of these issues back to the new country, whatever it's called. And the other issue you need to consider here is that the genuine and reasonable concern on the part of Israeli Zionists that there would be retribution from Palestinians. And that must never be allowed to happen. So coalition peacekeepers must be there as long as it takes to ensure that peace is kept and that there's no retribution and that people are safe in their own country. You may want to establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission along the lines of South Africa, but that would be the choice of the people. Okay, this is the last slide. I'm sorry, I've dragged you through a long talk. So this is the end. I hope I might have given some of you some food to thought and possibly also led some of you to wonder if there's anything you can do. What I would say is that you should speak to your MP. You should write to the foreign minister. Tell them that words are not enough, that you are witnessing genocide and ethnic cleansing, and that the words you hear from this government are not going to affect any change at all on the ground. The only thing that is going to make a difference from the Australian government is action, and that action has to be joining in coalitions and threatening extreme sanctions and peacekeeping forces if Israel does not start behaving like a decent democracy. Tell them that Israel has betrayed the trust of the international community with unconscionable brutality, and that now enough is enough. And tell them that, if necessary, Australia has to act without the United States. And we must do it now. Thank you.
We don't have the roaming mic, so I'm going to ask you to keep your questions really brief. Questions, not commentary, which we'll put to Michael as the speaker, and he will address them. For the recording, I will need to hear your question and repeat it or summarize it, so we can get it captured in the video. Put up your hand and your name, and if you would like, mention your affiliation, and I will moderate. Please, I think there's a question over here. I think you can, the mic is long enough, so you can.
Hi, Rob Shivers. Thanks very much for your talk, very interesting. My understanding there's about 7 million people in Israel. and there's about 2 million Arabs already living there, which you've explained part of it, they don't have citizenship rights. I'm just wondering what their thoughts or roles or feedback is in this process, because I haven't heard anything about that process.
You're talking about Palestinian citizens of Israel, do you mean?
Living
Yeah.
in Israel.
Yeah, so indeed. So it's confusing when you say Israel because Israel claims the West Bank and Gaza as well. So if you add Gaza and the West Bank together, you get approximately 5 million people, plus the Palestinian Arabs who are citizens of Israel already. And
20% of Israel.
say again?
20% of Israel.
20%.
To voting, and they
Yeah.
don't claim those two areas. They're disputed territories, Michael.
They were just annexed. They were just annexed this week.
No.
So by the Knesset.
No.
So,
Excuse me,
okay.
can we let the
Yeah.
speaker answer the question?
So in answer to your question, it is absolutely true that there are a number of Palestinians who do hold Israeli citizenship, but the far greater weight of Palestinian Arabs in Israel, former Mandate Palestine, do not have the vote. The ones who are recognised as citizens do get the vote. There are a number of Arab members of the Knesset at the moment. Yeah. And they represent,
Of the Arab nations?
so they represent, to some extent, Arab interests in Palestine. But of course, they don't represent the approximately 50% of the whole population of the country who don't have the vote.
So is there any feedback about their views on the situation? I mean, I haven't heard anything.
All I know is that if you ask two Palestinians the same question, you will get diametrically different answers. It's extremely hard to get a Palestinian view on the future because they are a brutalized people, and the problem, as I see it, is that when we go to Palestinians and say, "What do you want?" we are making the victims responsible for solving our moral inadequacy, our error. So I think it's very hard to do that. Can we take the question at the back there, Miriam?
Thanks, Michael. Look, I just wanted to make an alternative suggestion for your... Sorry.
Sorry. So it needs to be a question.
Okay,
It needs to be short, so I need to repeat it.
Okay, I understand completely. Sorry, you're right. I just wanted to get a clarification from Michael that he's saying there should be no Jewish state. Is that what you're saying, Michael?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes,
please?
yeah.
The question is from the questioner. You didn't mention your full name.
Miriam Sawley.
Miriam Sawley was to the speaker. Are you saying that the Jewish state should not exist?
Yes, very clearly. What I'm saying is that the state, which is, as described in the basic law, a state for this
Self-determination of Jews only, that state itself must be dissolved and essentially recreated as a democracy for everybody in the country. So it would no longer be only for the Jewish people.
Okay, so you obviously aware that that is an anti-Semitic proposition.
Sorry, can you please? This is a comment. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. This is not for comment.
All right, number two.
Question number 2,
My
please.
next question is, don't you think you should advise your listeners here, okay, who you have said write to your MPs and say the following things, to maybe do a little bit of their own research, because everybody should do their own research into such a complicated issue. So I really think...
All right, I got your question. Excuse me. Excuse me, Miriam. I'll repeat your question.
Please do.
So the question, I will paraphrase the question. Michael, the question I would like, it's Miriam again, for those watching the video. Do you encourage the audience to do their own research to get an independent view of their situation?
Yeah, that's a trivial question, but an important one in the sense that, Miriam, I'd suggest everybody in this room does more research on this question than most people outside the room. and that's why they're here. So I suspect you don't need to suggest that to them, but I will come back to your point earlier about whether what I'm suggesting is anti-Semitic. For a start, you know better than anyone, Palestinians are Semitic people. The whole business about anti-Semitism is a nonsense. What you're saying is it anti-Jewish? What I would say there is that it is no more anti-Jewish to criticize what the Israeli government is doing than if I want to criticize the United States for what it did. I listened to your question.
Miriam, can I
Yeah.
request that you sit down
Yeah.
and do not interrupt
Yeah.
the speaker? Thank
So
you
I
very
mean,
much.
yeah, it's no more anti-Jewish to criticize the Israeli government than it is to be anti-Christian to criticize the Americans for Guantanamo Bay. It's just a nonsense. And I criticize the Australian government for so many things, and I am not anti-Caucasian and I'm not anti-Christian. So I don't accept what you're saying.
Thank you. Next question, please. So I've got the lady next to Miriam, and then I've got the lady in black here, and then the gentleman at the back. Are you ready for your question, or should I go to somebody else first?
Sorry, you mentioned that there was
Sorry, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, my name is Aviva Freilich. I used to teach at UWA, retired now, happily so.
Short so I can repeat it, please.
Yes, thank you, that's what I want to say. I wanted to ask you, sorry, just lost my... You spoke about, the two-state solution, there was no possibility of it. No possibility of it. Now, is it true, I guess I want your opinion on this, that there were various plans that were put by Israel to Yasser Arafat? You may remember this. In fact, the last one might have been by Ehud Barak, who was giving a large portion of Israel. And all of them were rejected. All the plans were rejected. So when you say that Israel's got no intention of doing anything, I remember at Camp David very clearly, and I think it was under President Clinton.
So the question, if I can paraphrase,
Yes.
You gave us a rundown of the history. So in the history of the negotiations, did Israel make, I guess in my words, significant efforts for a two-state solution?
It certainly made significant efforts around a two-state solution. I'm just trying to sneak up a slide that was not in that pack, where I quote an Israeli negotiator. You only have to quote Israelis to realize how disingenuous the I haven't finished.
Please ask the question. Your question was very specific.
Yeah.
Please addressing it. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm very happy to listen to your questions. So I'm looking for a slide. It's by an Israeli negotiator who said something almost exactly along these lines. He said, what we do is we put entirely unreasonable proposals to them, and when they come back and reject them, we say they are to blame for the failure of the negotiations. I'll send it to you if you give me your email.
Sorry, can I just add something? I won't say anything else. You can quite lots of...
No, sorry. Your question has been answered. You put a question. The speaker has given his view. All right? Thank you.
Hi.
So, what you're saying is actually...
Sorry, can you mention your name and affiliation?
Not at all.
Sorry. No, thank you very much.
No, actually...
Well, somebody needs to...
Okay.
Israeli, I'm actually like from there.
No, so the rules are you need to introduce yourself.
Cool.
Right.
I don't want to mention my name. I'm in the public
So-
service, and I just prefer not to mention it.
So we'll give you
We'll give you a name. Madam X would like to ask a question.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I've got beef with everything you said, from start to end.
So, okay, we don't need a commentary, we need a question.
Okay.
Specific question, please.
So you said, thank you. So you said that Jewish state is not okay to exist because no other state in the world actually defined itself by religion.
I didn't quite say that, but
But that's what you said. It's wrong. You said it's a theocracy. Fine. So you've got 51 Muslim countries. Let's raise our hands. To all of them, decide they are international. We've got the Vatican, who is actually Catholic. We've got Britain, that is Anglican. We've got Italy, that is Catholic. You know, do we want to start this? Can we able to say that actually, after the Holocaust, there's a chance for the Jewish people, for my grandma, who crawled out of Auschwitz? The world didn't give her the country.
So can I?
She fought
No,
for
hang
it.
on. I think I know the question. Can I paraphrase the question?
Okay.
No, I think I can I paraphrase the question? So I think the question is, doesn't Israel have a right to be a theocratic state?
right. So
Hang on. Right now, 20% of people in Israel have a blue citizenship, and they can vote. So to call it theoretic.
Okay, so okay, let me
It's democracy.
let me
And we can
rephrase your
kick
question.
Bibi. Hang on.
Let
we
me-
can kick Bibi
Okay.
tomorrow.
Hold on, I'm going to ask you a question again. So is it
Every
correct?
4 years,
Is it correct? Is your question is? I think there's two questions. The question is.
How? Because I was living there
The question is.
for almost 50 years.
The question from Madam X is, she does not think that there's evidence that Israel is a theocratic state. And maybe I put it this way, if it is a theocratic state, what's the problem with it? Is that correct? Yeah, thank you.
So, it is a theocratic state according to the Israeli basic law. It says in Article 1C that Israel is a state for the self-determination of the Jewish people. That makes it a theocratic state. And
It's different from England.
so I'll tell you how it's different from England.
Excuse me, you've asked your question. The speaker is going to give his response. You don't have to accept it. We've had that discussion, and we move on to the next question. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, so quickly, the way that it's different from those other places is it does not give 50% of its population the right to vote because they are not Jewish. That is the difference. If you're in the Vatican, you can, I don't even know how the Vatican votes. I'm not a religious person. I'm not going to defend the Vatican, and I don't defend Iran, and I don't defend Saudi Arabia.
51 Muslim countries.
And the fact they're a dominant Muslim country does not mean that in their constitution they say they are only. So I think, I mean, it's a little hard for me now to conclude that what you're doing here is not simply trying to disrupt this event for everyone else. I mean, if you look back at the video of this, that is what you're going to see.
All right, can we move on to the next question? The gentleman at the back, please.
Hi, Callum Wood, no relation.
I'm glad to hear that.
My question is that throughout history, when we've seen the dismantling of oppressive structures, before that happens, we often hear a lot of rhetoric that it's not possible, that the minorities, the oppressed group might be too violent, or that there might be retribution. In South Africa, for example, there were fears that it would become, basically saying you can't live alongside these people because they will be too violent because of what's happened to them. And I was wondering if you could reflect on how we've learnt from those situations and how we can sort of project that forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Sorry, yeah.
So Callum's question is, in history we've had many examples of, can I put it this way, lost causes, where oppressed peoples, according to Callum, have been able over the arc of history to change and gain self-determination and gain justice. Would that be?
Yeah, and that those violent retributions haven't come to pass.
And the specter of violent retributions, that an argument against that self-determination haven't come to pass.
Yeah.
Is there any reflections for the speaker on
Yeah.
that?
I do genuinely think it is possible to do in a relatively peaceful manner in Israel, but I believe that Israel would be the most difficult case. When you look at those ultranationalists who have established, the way they established their settlements tells you a lot about the character of those cities. They would resist what I'm talking about almost certainly with force. And so when you're talking about achieving peace there, you really need to find a way either to bring those people along with you or to ensure that they are not able to do harm to other people. I guess you need to worry about some Islamic militants who might feel they have grudges that have to be prosecuted. So there would be a big job for peacekeeping, but what I think you're saying is exactly right, that the moment you pop that bubble, so much tension comes out of everything. So, the moment you say everybody has the vote, and people start to worry about who they're going to vote for, they start looking towards the future. The Israelis will try to make sure that they have a majority of people in parliament, and the Palestinian Arabs will look to have the same activity to get a majority. So people start looking forward very quickly. We've seen that in Rwanda, surprisingly, two communities that were literally hacking each other's arms off are now living in surprising peace. When was the last time you heard of some sort of crisis or stress in Rwanda? Same in former Yugoslavia. You couldn't have a Serb and a Croat sit on a bus together, and now these are all happily rubbing along. So I think that your point is absolutely correct. I think history tells us that it can be done, but I would not want to pretend that Israel is anything but the most difficult challenge on that score.
I'll need to move quicker.
Okay, sorry.
So quicker questions.
Quicker answers.
Short
Yep.
and sweet, remember?
Yes. Less than 10 minutes.
This gentleman here, and then I've got this lady at the back.
John O'Farmer, and Michael, thanks for a very erudite talk. And I wish us luck getting it done. The question I have, though, is as a diplomat, can you think of any plausible reason why Australia shouldn't expel the Israeli embassy?
Okay, the question from, sorry, what's your name again, sir?
John O'Farmer.
John O'Farmer is, his contention is Australia should close the Israeli embassy to Australia, and is that, the way it was put, is there a reason it shouldn't be done?
Look, sure, John. I think that there must be some precedents I can't think of where governments who are actively prosecuting genocide have been effectively made persona non grata in other countries. I personally do not think that's likely to be at all helpful. We need to talk with each other. I mean, that is exactly what I'm trying to do today. We need to work together, talk together, argue together, bash heads together, and that isn't helped, I don't think, by blocking diplomatic channels.
Thank you. The lady at the back.
My name is Naomi, and I lived in Israel for about 16 years many years ago. My question is, as a historian more than anything else, although I'm not an expert in the area, my question is, why didn't you mention, in the interest of balance, the 1928-29 pogroms in Israel, in which the Arab population killed as many Jews as they had an opportunity to? And why didn't you mention the Hamas manifesto, which is coming
So there's a lot of questions there I need to rephrase. Just- All right, can I rephrase it because of the recording? So the first, before I'll forget what your questions are. So what's your name again, sorry?
Naomi.
No, I'll try and remember first. So what's your name again, sorry?
Naomi.
Naomi. The first question is why did not you refer to the programs of the late 1920s against the Jewish settlers? I guess that's the question.
Yep.
Second question is why didn't you refer to the manifesto of Hamas? And the third one very quickly, and I need to move on after that.
Why did you conflate not this congregation here
Okay.
to the fact that the Lehi and Yirgun were outcasts, extremists were not accepted by the
So the third question was, you only get a right for one. You've managed to squeeze in three. So well done to you. And the third question is, why didn't you clarify that, or why did you conflate the fact that the terrorist groups that you talked about in the lead up to independence were not popular and not representative, I guess is the way that it was put.
Yeah. Okay, let me go to the second question first because it's simplest for me. I did refer to Hamas and its intention to expel Jews from Israel right in the very beginning. I said I did not agree with that. It's moot how they want to do it. It's either way, it's wrong, and I've said it's wrong. Then on the first question, I guess there are so many actions to and fro in the lead up to 1948, right? I mean, there were so many actions by Israeli militia way outweighing anything done by the Palestinians. I'm not disputing for a second what you're saying is right. I'm not aware of it, but I'm not disputing that. But what I'd say is that history has shown us that the weight of influence in those times was in favor of the Jewish militia. So toing and froing, but in the end, it was the Israeli terrorist militia that won the day. And the reason why I conflate them, I'll accept that, but partly because they were conflated. So Britain ran Mandate Palestine, and its administrative offices in Hotel Jerusalem were bombed in 1946 by the Irgun and Lehi. They were representative of Israeli Zionists, whether you like it or not. And in fact, the leader of the Irgun, Menachem Begin, became prime minister. And the person who said that without Deir Yassin, which was a massacre by the Irgun and the Lehi, was led by Menachem Begin, and it was endorsed by, and you're not even listening to the answer. It's very interesting, the dynamic here on the part of our Zionist friends. They ask questions, but they don't listen to answers.
All right, I think we've... thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to, it's past 8 o'clock, which is our normal ending time. We usually end at 10 to 8. Sorry, there's no more questions. You had a lot of opportunity to ask. I invite you to engage with Michael afterwards and clarify any comments. Before I finish, can I invite our past president, fellow of the Institute, Dr. Sue Boyd, to offer the vote of thanks to Michael for his work today.